the flickering light of Asia, or the Assyrian nation and church. The headquarters of the Russian southern armies were in Tiflis, and the Grand Duke Nikolai had been shifted as the commander-in-chief of the western armies to handle the Turkish situation in the south. The Assyrian leadership of the Patriarch were already recognized by Russia as an allied nation. Having sided with the allied powers, the Russian military authorities in Persia therefore urged Marshamun to pay a visit to the uncle of Tsar, the plight as well as the future of his flock being an ever-present burden upon his heart. The head of the Nestorian Church consented to do so. He was escorted with military honors as far as Julfa, the southern gate of the entry into the empire of the Tsar, where he was received with greater honors still. On a special train provided by the authorities with an escort of high Russian officials, he arrived in the capital of the ancient kingdom of Georgia. The city had assumed a bridal aspect. Its streets were bedecked with banners and bunting, and thousands of smaller flags were waving a hearty welcome to the hero of the Kurdistan Mountains. With an escort of the Russian dignitaries, preceded by the stirring strains of patriarch music, and between the solid walls of cheering multitudes, the Nestorian Patriarch was conducted to a palace prepared for him by the government. Perhaps no greater honors could have been bestowed upon any monarch of any of the neighboring kingdoms. His arrival was also welcomed by the Tsar himself through a telegram that will appear on another page. As highly honored guest of the uncle of the Tsar, Marshamun remained in Tiflis 7 days, and during those hope-inspiring days, from the palace of the Grand Duke, he poured into the very heart of the Russian Empire his just claims and complaints, together with the heart-rending tale of his exiled people's woes. The emperor was truly awakened to a deep sense of genuine sympathy, and also to a realization of Russia's responsibility toward the critical situation of a small Christian nation which had so bravely risked its very innocence in order to do its humble share in the great cause, for which, even though the allied nations were also bleeding, nevertheless they were in no danger of such total extermination as were Marshamun and his people. Had the Tsar of Russia continued to sit upon his throne, or had the lawless regime succeeded, the imperial house of Romanov appeared even in the rags of some political decency, or had it manifested even in a deteriorated form the standards of a rational government, a story altogether different than the one so imperfectly portrayed would have appeared in these humble pages. The emperor meant well. He became truly solicitous as to the welfare and the future of the small Assyrian nation. But who can prophesy tomorrow's events? A continually grumbling race which has steadily sought radical changes in the political forms of its government, without knowing what it desires and without a desire to change its own character and alter its own attitude. Toward Christ, the real and everlasting King of the earth, there is no telling what it may do or what step it may take next. So Marshamun, the Patriarch of the Nestorian Church and the acknowledged head of the Assyrian nation, in the midst of his most happy expectations, did not know that blacker days yet, and a more distant exile still, were waiting his people in the near future. It is a most gracious arrangement of Providence that tomorrow, with its joys or sorrows, with its successes or failures, should remain concealed from the view and the knowledge of the mortals. What could this brave patriarch of 30 years of age have done, had he then seen the still sadder disasters which were yet to befall his people and his flock? How would he have felt had he seen in advance the fearful tragedy that was to follow his own assassination? Infinitely better not to see tomorrow, and be satisfied with what Christ taught when he said, "Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." Happy and hopeful, highly pleased and greatly encouraged, Marshamun thanked the Tsar and bade farewell to the Grand Duke Nikolai. His departure from Tiflis was again marked with the bestowal of the previous honors, while his re-entry into Persia was made an occasion for a pageantry given the Oriental monarchs. This liberal leniency of the successors of Barsabeh had given rise to the existence of certain sectarian factions among the Persian Assyrians, who had become so saturated with unreasonable religious prejudices and leanings of their own as to be led to lose sight of the national unity and national aspirations. It is indeed quite possible to become so absorbed with the hope and the reality of the coming kingdom of Christ as to see no distinction between man and man, or between nation and nation. But the adherents of the various factions were very far from having attained those spiritual heights, and perhaps they never dreamed of the glory of the coming kingdom. They were a set of sects. Among the undoubtedly many genuinely converted Christians, many precious sons and daughters of God, but as a whole, they were almost certainly ignorant as to those potential possibilities of an emancipated, united, and liberally educated Christian Assyrian nation. Urmia has witnessed many times some gigantic processions, accorded to the visiting crown princes of Persia, but this ancient city, perhaps never in its entire history, had beheld such glorious reception, like the one that was given to the Nestorian Patriarch. The very Muslims who a few months before were bent upon total extermination of the Christians, now ought to be the first in the bestowal, vied with each other to be the first in the bestowal of their honors. Cowards and hypocrites they were, a genuine product of their own religion. For after the manner of Judas, while they were giving their reverential salams to a Christian patriarch with their heads bent to the ground, in their wicked hearts they were concocting the devilish conspiracy, which led to the assassination of the very man at whose feet they lay prostrate now. The Assyrians of Urmia gave a banquet in honor of the patriarch. To the banquet were invited Russian generals and officers, the Russian consul, various misbodies, the bishops of the Nestorian Church, Sinai together with the Maliks of the mountain Assyrians. It was at this banquet that the great significance of the visit of Marshamun became apparent. Here in this banquet, all sectarian fences were removed, old sectarian prejudices banished, and Marshamun Binyamin was publicly known and proclaimed as the political head of the United Assyrians. In the midst of the joyous demonstration, the Russian consul, who had acquired the knowledge of the Assyrian language, rose to his feet. In the Assyrian language said, "Gentlemen, you all have heard with what pageantry His Beatitude Marshamun, the Patriarch, was welcomed in Tiflis by Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich, and by all Russian dignitaries, the Russian people there. You will all rejoice as I have rejoiced to hear the telegram of His Majesty the Emperor, which he sent to Marshamun through His Highness and the Grand Duke. I will read it. I request of your Highness to tell Marshamun, the Patriarch of the Nestorian Assyrians, how deeply I have felt the influence of his prayers. I believe our God will help us in the plan of our work to emancipate the Christians of Turkey from their century-long afflictions. I feel heartily grateful to the Patriarch for the help he has rendered in the war, and for his willingness to cooperate with us. Signed, Nikolai." "I will read another telegram," continued the consul, "from His Excellency the Russian Minister of Tehran. He says, please tell His Beatitude Marshamun that I heartily share with the joys of the Assyrians in having the Patriarch in their midst. There is for His Beatitude and His people waiting a clear and peaceful future. I request his prayers. Now, in the name of the Tsar," added the consul, "I ask you all to be patient and to believe that the servants of the Tsar will do all in their power to carry out the wishes of His Majesty the Emperor concerning you, who among the Assyrians would not be intoxicated with the effect of such joyous tidings." These assurances, together with the liberal assistance given by the Russian government, acted like tonic administered to a feeble body. All previous sorrows were almost entirely forgotten. All garments of mourning were transformed into festal robes, and the hopelessness of yesterday was turned into the happiest expectations of tomorrow. Poverty, suffering, and even additional sacrifices from now on were no longer looked upon by the Assyrians with a paralyzing fear, but rather they were hopefully regarded as righteousness of their claim for independence and freedom, which they desired above all else. The star of Assyria appeared bright on the horizon, but the elements that would soon make it obscure were constantly working unseen and observed by the eye of the man.